The desire to own the latest and greatest smartphone is an understandable one. Even if you've been carrying a smartphone since the days they were just PDAs with cellular connectivity, there's still a thrill to coming home with the latest hardware, armed with blistering fast performance, the hottest new features, and featuring a sleek futuristic design. For Apple fans, this is the time of year to go shopping for a new iPhone, but this year the question of which model to go with is trickier than ever. Do you go with a standard iPhone 7 with its 12-megapixel camera, a very respectable camera with an f1.8 aperture and extended color range, or do you double down on image-taking hardware with the new iPhone 7 Plus and its all-new dual camera arrangement? Do two cameras mean pictures that look twice as good? And what about those other iPhone 7 Plus enhancements, like the extra RAM and extended battery? Did they add up to making the 7 Plus this year's must-have upgrade? I'm Stephen Shank with Phone Arena, and you're watching my full review of the Apple iPhone 7 Plus. The iPhone 7 is a handset that's all about refinement, taking the familiar look of the 6 and the 6S, streamlining that design with a new solid-state home button, fading into the background antenna lines, and a long overdue dose of water-resistant construction. It's very much a derivative phone, and that's great because Apple's really nailing what's working for it, while also not being afraid to tweak a few things here and there in the aim of perfection, even if that includes the controversial move to drop the familiar headphone jack. And while the iPhone 7 Plus builds off those same choices that brought us the iPhone 7, it pushes out on its own in a way we haven't quite seen from a Plus model before, really emphasizing that this isn't just about big iPhones and little iPhones, but about the user experience these two ultimately distinct phones can offer. And a whole lot of that has to do with a fancy new dual rear camera on the 7 Plus. Before we dive full into a look at that new camera hardware, let's step back for a broader overview of the new plus-sized iPhone. The iPhone 7 Plus comes in with the very same footprint as the iPhone 6S Plus. Button placement remains consistent, but if you look closely you can already spot some of the ways Apple's been refining its design, like removing the shallow cutout between volume keys. While button placement may be the same, the hardware itself is evolving, and the biggest difference here is the presence of a new home button. It's still got Touch ID, which continues to make authentication quick and painless, but now it's no longer a physical button that moves and clicks when you press it. Instead, the new solid-state component responds to finger pressure in much the same way as the screen's 3D touch system, and the phone's Taptic engine recognizes a firm button press with an emulated click of its own. It doesn't feel quite right at first, but the illusion quickly overtakes you, and you'll forget the button isn't really clicking at all in no time. Continuing our tour around the phone's body, we see that big new camera bulge around back, housing the pair of 12-megapixel shooters and flanked by the upgraded quad LED flash. And while that stretched out camera bump may be the most attention-getting component of the phone's backside, we're also very interested in what our eyes aren't drawn to, namely the tucked-away antenna stripes. They're more visible on other iPhone 7 Plus color options, but with this black palette, they practically fade into nothingness, and that makes for a really nice, clean look. Finally, we can't ignore what's happening down south, and it wouldn't be an iPhone 7 Plus discussion without talking about Apple's decision to remove its phone's analog headphone jack. Instead, users now have to make a choice. Go with new headphones that connect over lightning cables, like the pair of new EarPods that ship with a smartphone, carry around the included lightning to analog adapter Apple provides and keep on rocking your old pair of headphones, or just go full-on wireless with a Bluetooth pair, maybe like the soon-to-land Apple AirPods. Doing away with ports may seem like moving backwards to some of you, but it definitely makes one job much easier for Apple, sealing off one point of entry as the manufacturer brings us its first ever formally water-resistant iPhones. Like the iPhone 7 and new Apple Watch, the iPhone 7 Plus offers water and dust resistance. You probably won't want to try using it while scuba diving, but Apple's hardened the phone's body against the threat of water penetration from things like casual splashes, sprays, and even a not-too-deep drop underwater. While all this hardware comes together in a package that's the same basic size as last year's iPhone Plus, Apple still managed to shave a few grams off its weight, giving us the lightest Plus model since the original 6. With everything staying the same size, it shouldn't be a shock to learn that Apple's brought us another Plus phone with a 5.5-inch display. Resolution stays at 1080 by 1920, but Apple brings the panel the same sort of upgrades also picked up by the iPhone 7, higher brightness, and increased color range. In its official docs, Apple claims that both the 7 and 7 Plus should share the same brighter screen tech, but in our tests, the Plus actually came out significantly ahead, with a display much brighter than even Apple advertised, and hey, who doesn't love it when a company underpromises and over-delivers? But while the iPhone 7 Plus may compare favorably to other iPhones, there are lots of other 5.5-inch handsets out there, and Apple's model, though sleek enough on its own, can seem positively bulky when placed head-to-head with a more petite 5.5-incher, like Samsung's Galaxy S7 Edge. After upgrading our existing iPhones and iPads, to say nothing of spending some time with the smaller iPhone 7, we're intimately familiar with iOS 10 by now, and its execution on the iPhone 7 Plus doesn't really offer any new twists. That shouldn't sound like a complaint though, as iOS 10 brings a lot to the table that we really like, from the tricked out new look of messages with stickers and emoji galore to the convenience of Rise to Wake and a widget-enhanced lock screen. While you can get access to iOS 10 on any number of Apple devices, the iPhone 7 Plus manages to bring users one of the smoothest implementations of it yet, thanks to the power of the phone's new A10 Fusion chip and the most RAM we've ever seen on an Apple smartphone. In our battery of benchmark tests, the iPhone 7 Plus and iPhone 7, also packing that same A10 Fusion processor, went head-to-head for the top spot. Sometimes the Plus took the honor, while other times the 7 itself pulled ahead, possibly due to reduced rendering requirements of the lower-res screen. But not only does the 7 Plus offer this kind of great performance, but it also features 3GB of RAM to the 7's 2GB, helping to prepare this handset for dealing with particularly demanding apps, or just a lot of regular ones. Speaking of apps, you're going to have plenty of room for them thanks to the new base level of 32GB of storage for this year's iPhones, the 7 Plus included. While the days of 16GB have long been numbered, it was especially frustrating to see such paltry storage on this top-shelf phablet, so we're glad to finally see it go. And as 16GB retires, Apple hooks us up with a new high-end storage option, providing a 256GB model for users who simply can't get enough space. Just like with the iPhone 7, the 128GB and 256GB storage tiers are also connected to Apple's limited availability Jet Black color option. You won't find any 32GB Jet Black iPhone 7 Plus. In addition to glossy jet black, the iPhone 7's color options are joined by the matte black you see here, as well as the return of silver, gold, and rose gold. The big story with multimedia this year may be the iPhone losing its headphone jack, but we do gain something in the process, as the iPhone 7 Plus picks up a pair of stereo speakers. The bottom-mounted component we're familiar with from years past is now joined by a speaker in the phone's earpiece, and the pair of them together sounds pretty good. Like with the iPhone 7 though, we've noticed how the ear speaker is a lot lighter on the bass than the bottom edge component, making things sound a little unbalanced at times. But at least it's really loud, and combined with the big 5.5-inch screen, that makes the iPhone 7 Plus a good phone for sharing video with friends. Okay, we've been taking our time getting here, but how about that camera? Apple doubles up on its camera tech with the iPhone 7 Plus, pairing the wide-angle 12-megapixel camera from the iPhone 7, with its bright f1.8 aperture, with a second 12-megapixel camera, this one equipped with an f2.8 telephoto lens. While that arrangement sounds like one that could make photo taking unnecessarily complicated, Apple's software makes dealing with the pair a breeze. Just keep the camera in 1x mode for wide shots, and tap the button once for an effortless 2x zoom. That's it. Switching back and forth is painless, with no worries about long waits while refocusing. And if you really do want to push limits, digital zoom extends to an admittedly noisy 10x. Just like dual-camera smartphones on Android, Apple's not above using the iPhone 7 Plus's pair to pull off some neat shooting effects, promising a cool controlled blur bokeh portrait mode. Unfortunately, that one's not ready just yet, or at least it's only available in beta. That's an odd move for Apple to launch hardware like this without all the software ready, but we're still eager to give it a shot once it arrives. Video performance on the iPhone 7 Plus is as smooth and crisp as we'd expect from our experience with the iPhone 7, but the availability of zoom adds a great new twist to its execution. You can jump in and out of zoom without taking a break from filming, making sure you don't miss any important moments. All this new hardware demands a lot of electricity, and Apple responds by upping battery size from last year, giving the iPhone 7 Plus a 2900 mAh component. That's around 5% larger than the 6S Plus had. Sadly, that doesn't translate into a similar gain in battery life, and our testing showed the 7 Plus coming in at just about the same time as the 6 Plus, even a few minutes shorter actually. Still, with a brighter screen, faster processor, more RAM, and an extra camera, things could be a lot worse, and admittedly, we're resigned to be happy just not seeing a bigger loss. With the new iPhone 7 Plus, Apple's given us one of the most compelling reasons yet to say goodbye to smaller iPhones and embrace the Plus for all of its extras. Battery life adds an hour and a half over what you get with the iPhone 7, extra RAM gives software room to grow, and maybe more than anything, the 2x zoom on the new dual camera's telephoto lens will change the way you take pics and shoot video, very much for the better. Still, Apple's 5.5-inch handset is starting to feel a little bit on the large side. While we appreciate the desire to return to a familiar design, maybe it's time to start tightening up those bezels and shrinking the overall build a little. Still, if you don't mind the size, this is the iPhone to get. well worth the price of admission even as we wait for some new features to arrive via software update. If not, the iPhone 7 still won't steer you wrong, and who knows, maybe next year the 7S will inherit the dual camera from the Plus, giving us the best of both worlds. For now though, I'm Steven Shank with Phone Arena. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming coverage, including Apple Watch Series 2.